In this tutorial, we're going to make a glowing object bounce from point to point, and every time it jumps, it plays a note. So what's happening under the hood here is that we're making a vector object follow a predetermined path, playing a predetermined song. And it's one of those concepts where it's really easy to visualize in your mind what you want to achieve, but as you probably might know, it can be a bit tricky to make curves in Blender behave as you intended. So I made a free add-on to solve this problem, and I'm going to show you how you can make this glowing object play any song you can think of using only free and open source software. So here we are in Blender version 4.2, and I'm going to start out by deleting everything and making a curve Bezier. So this curve is going to be our projectile, or the energy trail that is traveling through our music. So I'm going to press F2 and rename this to projectile. And then we're going to give this some thickness by going to Object Data Properties, and under Geometry, you can increase the bevel depth. But we don't want the curve to swing like this, we want it to be perfectly straight. So let's press Tab to go to edit mode, and then let's press V to set the handle type to automatic. So now when you go back to object mode, we want this curve to be shaped like a projectile, like this. So it's like a drop of water, or this energy trail that is traveling this way. So to make that shape, let's go Shift A and let's make another Bezier curve. And let's call this taper. So now let's select our projectile curve, and under Geometry, you can set the taper object to be this new curve. And now if you increase the depth all the way up to 1, you can select the taper. And in edit mode, you can select these control points, and you can see that we are controlling the shape of this. So I want our projectile to be moving this way. So let's make this perfectly thin. You can hold on Control and rotate it so it's perfectly aligned with the grid. And then let's change the shape here. And I want this to be like a round shape, but you can see that we are limited by the poly count of our curve here. So to increase the resolution of our projectile, you can increase the resolution preview. But now you can see that even though we have increased this to be a lot, it's still low poly. And that is because we also need to increase the resolution of the taper. So let's select our taper and let's click and drag and increase this a little bit more. So now we have a higher resolution projectile, but if you view it from the side like this, you can see that it's still low poly on this angle. So to fix this, we can increase the bevel resolution. And what's really powerful about the workflow we're doing today is that this is a completely non-destructive workflow. So at any point, if something is lagging in your viewport or something like that, you can always change the resolution preview without changing the behavior of our animation. Okay, so let's tweak this shape a little bit more. I think it's too thick, so let's just lower the bevel depth a little bit. And then I want it to be a little bit rounder at the edge. So to do this, we can select the projectile, press Tab to go to edit mode, right-click Subdivide, and now we have a new control point in the center here. So let's press G and X to move it on the X-axis, and now you can see we can change the weight of this a little bit. And then let's take this point at the tip and let's scale this down. So now we have a beautiful shape that is a little bit of a head over here, and then it's a little bit thinner back here, which I think is really cool. But feel free to make whatever shape you like. Okay, so let's give this projectile something to bounce between. I want to go Shift A, and let's make a mesh plane, and let's scale this down. And I want to view this from above, so let's press Z on this gizmo. You can also use numpad 7. And now we want to just make a bunch of copies of this. So let's press Shift D and move it over there, Shift D, another one. And I want to do some jumpings where it's first it's close and then it's far away. So let's just make a bunch of copies. Let's make it go back and forth a little bit. And now we want to make this bounce in between these points. And to make this trajectory a little bit natural, I want the trajectory of the longer distances to be a higher bounce, and I want the short distances to be a lower bounce. And you might be thinking, well, that's just something you could figure out with math, I guess, right? And yes, you are right. So I made an add-on to do this, and it's actually not an add-on you even need to download. If you are in Blender version 4.2, you can simply select all these objects, and you can go F4, Preferences, and in the Get Extensions tab, you can just search for Simple Bounce Curve. And there you can see, there is my extension. And if you click Install, you have the add-on installed. That is so cool. So the extension platforms on Blender is really nice. So with the add-on installed, select all the objects you want to make a bounce curve in between. And let's go Object. And then you can click this new button, which is called Create Bounce Curve. So now we have this curve that is bouncing in between these objects. To make our energy trail follow this curve, I think I want to scale it down a little bit actually. So let's select the taper curve and the projectile curve and just scale these down by pressing S. And then once you have scaled them down, make sure you go Control A, Apply Scale. So to make our curve follow the path, let's select our projectile. Let's go to Modifier Properties, Add Modifier, Deform Curve. And then you set the curve object to be our new simple bounce curve. Now, if you select your projectile, you can press G and you can just move your cursor and you can see that it's bouncing, but it's a little bit, something is off here, right? And the problem is that when we are moving it right now, we're moving it on all the axes actually, on the x-axis and the y-axis and the z-axis. But if you lock the y and z-axis, now you can press G and move it, and it will only move on the x-axis, and it is looking a lot better. But there's one thing I don't really like about this. I don't think these trajectories look super realistic. I don't want it to be like this. I want it to be more like this, like an even arc. So what we want to do is that we want to do changes to our curve, but we want to do all the changes in batch. So we don't want to press tab to go to edit mode and then kind of tweak this individually and then this one and then this one, because that is extremely time consuming. We want to make sure that every operation we're doing to this curve is being done to the entire curve. So no matter how long your bounce path is, it will work. So select your path, press tab to go to edit mode, and then press A to select all of the points. And then you want to hold down shift and select one of the points so it's kind of like highlighted like this. So it's like a white, you see these white things? Because if you don't do that, this next thing won't work. So we're going to go F3 and search for checker deselect. And now you can see that we have selected only the bottom points. And you can bring up this little menu, you can offset it by 1. And now we have all these top points selected. So since this curve is alternating between bouncing and, flying in the air, we can use this technique to very easily select only the top points of the curve. So now that these are selected, we can increase the scale. But if you just press S and scale it up, it doesn't really work. We have to change the transform pivot point to individual origins. And now you can press S and you can scale this up. And look at that, we have a much more natural trajectory. And if you want to change the curve height, you can reset the position of the 3D cursor by pressing Shift C. And then you can set the transform pivot point to 3D cursor. So now when you press S and Z, you can scale this up on the Z axis. So it's bouncing a little bit higher or lower. And then you can change it back to individual origins if you like and tweak a little bit more. Okay, so I'm happy about the bounce trajectory, but I don't want the curve to start in the ground here. I want it to start somewhere over here and bounce down, and then it starts bouncing. So to do this, let's select our bounce path. Let's press tab to go to edit mode. And you want to select this point right here. But you cannot select this by pressing click and select because these are multiple points, so you will mess it up. So you can click and drag to box select. So now you have the entire thing selected. So now you can press E to extrude this, and then let's press E to extrude it once more. Let's click and drag both of these, and then go V and set the handle type to automatic. And then if you like, you can rotate this a little bit. Yeah. So now let's animate our projectile. Let's press K to insert a location keyframe, and then let's zoom out so we can see everything. And then let's go all the way to frame 250. And now you can press G and you can move your cursor all the way around. You can see it's bouncing around like that. Really cool. And then when we get to the end here, we want to overshoot it a little bit like this. And then let's go K for insert keyframe menu and then click location. So now we have an animation of a bouncing curve. Look at that. So you'll probably notice that it starts out slow and then it goes faster and faster. And that is because Blender's default keyframe interpolation is Bezier, but you want it to be linear. So if you want to see what it looks like, you can just pull this up and press Ctrl Tab, and then you can zoom out there. And now you can see that this is our keyframe graph, but we want this to be linear. So simply press T and let's set it to linear interpolation. So now it will go at the same speed. So let's press Ctrl Tab to go back to the timeline view, and let's bring this back down. I'm so happy about this effect. It just feels so organic when this is just bouncing in between the objects like this. So I actually recommend that you experiment with this because this has a lot more use cases than just visualizing music. One thing I've been using it for is to do stylized map animations, for example, which becomes really easy with this add-on. But how do we make this bouncing effect line up with the music? Now, this is where things get a little bit more interesting because you could just import any audio file and start lining it up with the waveform peaks. So the x-axis would be the note timing and the y-axis would be the pitch of the note. And eventually you would probably get a satisfying result. However, if you can create your music digitally, you can export it as a MIDI file, which is a format that contains a ton of information about the notes that were played, like their velocity, timing, and pitch, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so to record some MIDI music, we can use this fully open source online MIDI editor, which is signal.versal.app. I'm just going to click launch. And here you can simply just add a note. And then you can add another one and a third one. And you can basically just play any music that you want. Okay, so this is the old Russian folk song called Korubayniki. You might have heard it before. So once you have the song, you can change the sound if you like. But I'm just going to go for a default acoustic grand piano. So to save this as a MIDI file, let's go File, Save. And in addition to the MIDI file, we also want to export this as an audio file. So let's go File, Export Audio. Let's just click Export. So here we have our MIDI file and our WAV file, and we can listen to our WAV file. But we can't really do much with the MIDI file, in Blender at least. But we know it contains all the data, and we know what we want to do with the data. Remember, we just want the x-axis to show the note timing, and the y-axis to show the pitch of the note. And then we'd like this to be imported to Blender as objects that we can select, you know, like an SVG file. That would be perfect. So what we really want is a tool that can read the MIDI data and render it like we specify on the x and y-axis, and allow us to save that as an SVG image. Perfect, let's just tell ChatGPT to do that. And it works. So this tool can run in a browser. It's up on my website, polyfure.com. You can find it by just clicking on this slider and dragging until it says broop, and then you click the third O, like that. Okay, there it is. Yeah, so here's the simple MIDI to SVG converter. You can just click Browse, and then let's select your MIDI file, click Open, and there you can see it's bum, 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 bum. It is our MIDI file as an SVG. So let's just click Download SVG. So in Blender, I'm going to delete this previous stuff. I'm just going to keep our projectile like that. And then let's go F4, Import, Scalable Vector Graphics, SVG. And then I'm going to find our file, click Import. And it might look like nothing happened, but it's actually there. You just have to zoom in because it's really, really tiny. So let's just click and select all of these. And let's press S to scale it up. And I want to scale it up a lot, actually. And now let's move it over here. So now we have these points that will match our music. And just a quick note, and this is actually a really quick note, sorry. You can probably tell that this looks different than in the music visualizers I've been sharing on Instagram. And that's because these use actual sheet music, which is pretty cool if you're into that, but it takes a little bit longer to set up. So we're keeping it simple in this tutorial, but if you want to learn the longer process of how to do this with accurate sheet music, there's going to be more information about that at the end of this video. Okay, so let's make this bouncing curve in between these objects. So select all of them. And now we're going to use this Create Bounce Curve add-on, but you will quickly notice that if you try to use this, it just doesn't work. Look at that, just nothing happens. And that is because this add-on uses the origin of the objects. So by default, all SVG files are sharing the same origin, like right over there because we moved it there. We want this to have individual origins. So with all these notes selected, you want to go right-click, Set Origin to Geometry. And now you can see you have these correct origins. So now you can select all of them and you can go Object, Create Bounce Curve. And there is our beautiful curve. And now, as the last time, I want to change these bounce trajectories to be a little bit more organic. So select all of them. Let's just do the checker deselect, individual origins. Let's scale this up. Yeah, that's good. And then I also want this to start a little bit like this. Yeah, okay, so let's visualize this music. So let's take our projectile and let's go to the modifier properties. You can see we already have the curve modifier. So let's just set that to be the simple bounce curve. Oh, and we actually also still have the animation. Okay, so what we're going to do now is that we're going to sync this up. So every time it bounces, it plays the correct note. And to make life a lot easier for ourselves, we're going to import the audio file to Blender. So let's just bring this up a little bit and let's go right click, horizontal split. And let's just click here. And now you can set this editor type to video sequencer. And now to import the audio, simply hold your mouse here and go Shift A and let's go sound. And let's find our WAV file that we exported, add sound strip. And now if you press play, you can hear the sound file and that's good. But we want to see it as well. So you can use these little handles here to zoom in, and we can zoom in here as well. And then you want to press N to bring up this little menu here, and then you can enable the display waveform. So now we can actually see our audio, and then you can increase the volume also. Just make sure it doesn't go red because then it's peaking. Okay, that's good. So now when you press play, you can see the music. Okay, so first of all, you can see that the projectile is jumping a little bit before it hits. So we want to start it when it's here. We don't want to start right at frame 1. So we need to offset the music just a little bit. So we can see that it's 9 frames, right? So let's select this sound clip and let's press G and then X. And then you can move it all the way over here. So now when you press play, the first note is synced up. But if you let this keep playing, it's just not synced at all. So had this been a 2D effect, we would have been able to just give this a linear amount of speed, and it could just go like this, and all the notes would sync up. But since we are working in 3D here, not only do we have this distance in between the notes, we also have this distance, which varies from note to note. So it's not that easy to fully automate this, but I'm going to show you a really nice way where you can just manually tweak it so every note hits perfectly every time. So we're going to split our viewport in half. So let's right click on this line and let's go vertical split. And let's set this editor type to graph editor. And let's press N to bring away this menu. And now here you can see we have our curve. So now if you view this from the front by pressing -Y on this gizmo, now you can see we have this really nice view from the front there. So what we are going to do, we're going to be moving through this timeline, and every time we can see that there's a note hit, you can increase this to make it a little bit easier to see. Every time we see that there's a note hit, we're going to make sure that that is the correct bounce. And this might sound horrible, but it's actually really fast to do, because we are going to be using something that is called automatic keying. So simply enable the automatic keying, and you go to the first one, and you can hear this. Okay, that sounds correct. Oh, by the way, if you go to playback, you can enable scrubbing. So now you can hear the music when you're scrubbing. So here you can see we have the first bounce, and then over there. And then here we have the second bounce. So now you can simply press G, and you can move it there. And look here, we just automatically made a keyframe because we have the auto keying on. So now let's move to the next note, which is this one, which starts here, you can see. And then you can just press G and you can move it so it's kind of wrinkling like this. It looks a little bit disgusting, but then you know it's actually bouncing. And now you can see we are creating these keyframes here. So now let's go to the next one. Okay, that's good. And now let's press G and let's move this back. And by the way, if you didn't have any keyframes, you might experience that it's not moving forward if you're just playing it like this. And that's okay, because what you can do, you can select your keyframes, pressing A to select all the keyframes. And now you can go Shift E and you can go linear extrapolation. So now you can see that Blender is extrapolating the last keyframe, which makes this a lot easier to do. So now let's zoom out and play this from the beginning. Here you can see. Oh, it's actually almost perfectly lined up with this one. And let's move it there. Next note, there. Yeah, and then sometimes it's just perfectly lined up, but I like to just add a keyframe there anyways. And then if you like, you can skip forward many frames like this, go to this one, and then you can go back and kind of just make sure that they're perfectly lined up. And then this is a long one. And there we go. Oh, I forgot to make it bounce one last time at the end there. So let's select our path and let's press Tab to go to edit mode. You want to box select the last control point, press E to extrude, and then let's do E for another one. And now you can box select these two and press V and set the handle type to automatic. So now it will kind of bounce one last time. And one important note is that you can always add extra stuff to the end of the animation and it will not mess it up. But if you go to the beginning of the animation, you can't really do any changes, because if you do a change here, then that change is offset and will mess up your entire animation. Okay, let's have a look at what we got there. Okay, so if I'm viewing this from here right now, you can see it pretty quickly gets really small and difficult to see what's happening over there. So I want to make a camera that is following the motion like this. So let's go Shift A and let's make a camera. You want to just look at this from the angle where you want the camera to be placed. So I think maybe this is good. And then let's select the camera. Let's go View, Align Camera to View, which is Control-Alt Numpad 0. So now you can scroll to zoom in, and then you can right click and you can adjust the focal length to zoom the camera out a little bit. And with the camera selected, you can press G and you can move it down, for example, or you can press R and rotate and frame your shot. So I'm going to press R and then X again. So we're tilting the camera down. So now when we press play, this just starts moving and we want the camera to just follow this. So select the camera and press K to insert a keyframe. Let's go location. And then let's move forward until it's out of the camera. And then let's press G and then X because we're moving on the X axis. And then let's move till we can see it again. There it is. and let's press K and insert a location keyframe. So now the camera is following it, but it's following it too fast. And this is the same issue that we had earlier, that the default keyframe interpolation is Bezier. So make sure your camera is selected, and then you press A to select all the keyframes, and then press Shift E and select linear extrapolation. And now you can see, not only do you have this linear graph where the camera is following it, you can also add keyframes. So if you select this last keyframe, here we go, Shift D, you can duplicate it. So this just makes it really easy to tweak this. Okay, so we need to move it up a little bit. Okay, nice. So we have our camera that is following this animation. Let's add some materials to make this look a little bit more interesting. So first of all, I want to go to render properties and I want to set the render engine to cycles. And then let's set our viewport shading to rendered. And then if you like, you can make some more room here. So you can just right click, join areas and click on the one you want to remove. And now here we are in the render view. And this looks quite boring because it's not really that much here yet. So we want to change the material of the projectile. So let's go to material properties and let's give it a new material by clicking new. And let's call this energy trail. I want to change the surface from principal BSDF to emission. And now we want to add a ground plane. So let's press Shift C to make sure that our 3D cursor is at the center of our scene. And let's press Shift A and let's make a plane. And now you press S to scale this up. I want to zoom in on these nodes and want to press G and Z to move it a little bit down on the Z axis. So we get this cool little shadow effect on our nodes. And now to view this from the camera again, you can click this camera icon or numpad 0. So now you can see that this energy trail material is lighting up our ground, and we can increase the strength to emphasize this effect even more. So let's set this to 15, for example. Okay, so now let's give our ground plane a little bit more of an interesting shader. So let's select our ground plane and let's make a new material and let's call this ground plane. And I want to set the surface shader to mix shader. And I want to set the top shader to diffuse and then the lower shader to glossy. And then you can lower the roughness of the glossy. So now you can see the reflection of our energy trail here. And you can make it a little bit darker. And then we can tweak this grayness. And now to get some more contrast in our scene, let's go to world properties and let's set the surface strength to 0. Oh, I think we need to change this a little bit. Okay, nice. But I think I want some color on this energy trail. So select the projectile and in the material properties, let's click this color and let's give this a yellow material, for example. Yeah, I think that's cool. You know what? If I disable overlay now and I look through the animation, it's a little bit difficult to see that we're going forward. So to emphasize the motion that we are actually traveling through this world, I want to add some lights. So let's go Shift A and let's make a light, area light. And you want to press G and Z to move this up a little bit. You can see you get this beautiful soft light. I want to move this a little bit on the Y axis. And if you want to move it around more easily, you can click this move icon here. So now you can click these arrows instead. Yeah, and I think I want to place it there. Yeah, maybe a little bit lower. So I'm going to press G and move it on the Z axis. But one thing that is bothering me a little bit is that we can see the reflection of this light. And I only want to have this really soft, diffuse interaction with the lighting. So to fix this, we can simply select our light and under object properties, you can go down to visibility and you can disable the ray visibility for the glossiness. So now this light is not reflecting any light, but it's still lighting up the diffuse part of the material, which I just think looks a lot better because it was a little bit distracting with this reflection here. So now let's just duplicate this light a bunch of times. Let's go Alt-D to duplicate linked in case you want to do changes to the light later. And let's press X to specify the X-axis. And I think this is a good distance. And then without doing anything else, you can press Shift-R to repeat that action. I think that's too much. Let's get rid of this one and then this one. Okay, so now let's view this from the camera view. Yeah, I think I like that. By the way, if you want to isolate what the camera is seeing, you can press Ctrl-B and just click and drag like this. And now we are only rendering what's inside the camera border. I think maybe the ground is a little bit too bright. So let's go to the material properties and let's lower the diffuse strength here. Oh, by the way, one thing I completely forgot about. You see these things here, these SVG files that we imported. These are actually curve objects. If you select all of them, so in the Korobani collection, you can just select this one and hold down Shift and then select all the way down to curve 18. So now all of these are selected and they are the only thing that are selected. You can press Tab to go to edit mode, A to select all the control points, and you can press V and change the handle type to automatic. Because since these are curves, we can still change the design of these. So now we have these round notes instead, which could look better if that's a look that you're into. Yeah, I think I like that better actually. Okay, so let's export this as a video file. And what's really interesting is that since we already have this audio file in the Blender project file, we can export this video with the audio. So we don't really have to use any more editing software. We can just do everything from Blender. So let's go to the output properties, and under output, you can change the file format. I think the default is PNG. You want to change it to FFmpeg video. And if you keep scrolling down, you can see under encoding, you want to change the container from Matroska to MPEG-4. And then you want to change the output quality from medium quality to high quality. And under audio, make sure the audio codec is not set to no audio. I recommend that you set it to AAC. And then these default settings are fine. So I'm just going to render this to my desktop, Audiovisualizer version 1. Accept. And then I'm just going to set the resolution to 50% so I don't have to wait forever. And then in the render properties, I want to set the max samples to, I think 256 is good for this. So let's just do a test render actually. Oh, we forgot to add the glow. So to add glow really fast, really simple, let's just simply go to compositing and let's click use nodes. And let's just go Shift A and let's add a filter glare node. And I just like to set it to fog glow with a high quality. And I like to set the mix to minus 0.96, for example, the threshold to 0 and the size to 9. So now when we render this, yeah, now we have this glow effect that just makes this look a little bit brighter, if you ask me. Okay, so for the final render, I like to have motion blur enabled, but you should know that if you have the persistent data enabled, that just completely breaks the motion blur for this effect. So if you're rendering this with motion blur, make sure that the persistent data is disabled. So to render the video, let's go render, render animation. Okay, so the render has finished. Let's have a look at the final result. Okay, I changed my mind and did it in 100% resolution instead, and I swapped the audio track to a real piano recording, so you can download that audio file for free, link in the video description. Now, if you wish this video was longer, or you wish we had more time to explore more advanced audio visualization techniques, like using actual sheet music or this 3D twisting waveform concept, I've been secretly working on something for a while now. Or not completely secret, my patrons already knew about this, but I've been exploring unique ways to make audio reactive 3D animations. And there are so many powerful techniques I want to show you. So I'm making an in-depth course where we'll have all the time in the world to go really deep into audio visualizers. So I'm not ready yet and I'm still working on it, but I'm very excited about this. So if you want to be notified when the course drops, check out the link in the description to be notified via email. And if you watch this entire video as a thank you for the support, the first 500 people to sign up for this mailing list will get this custom energy trail shader that works with the tutorial that you just watched. So that's it. I hope to see you when the course is ready. Thank you for the support, and thanks for watching.